So, one topic that I really wanted to bring us together to talk about in a more deep way is the idea of exhaustion. Okay, so
Why would you feel like this is something we have things to say on?
oh no, I see your eyes, all of you. A lot of the times, I see your eyes. Okay,
Fair enough.
and so I want to talk about. I mean, at Orange Nebula, we work on projects that are so big. Like, these are not small things that we're doing. We work on these huge, big projects that sometimes push us to the edge and really leave us feeling exhausted. So, how do we do this? Like, how can we stay inspired when we're pushing ourselves to this level of exhaustion? And of course, I want to put a nice disclaimer that in no way are we advocating for any sort of burnout, because that can come when you're pushing yourself too hard. And I think all of us know our limits, and sometimes we've pushed ourselves past it. Sometimes we're getting ourselves close to it, but it happens, okay? We're exhausted a lot. We have real lives, we have families, we have personal issues, and we have jobs that we love and that we're doing things and creating things that we love. So
the question is sort of like just talking about the experience of being exhausted
Yes.
and like how to get inspiration or what inspiration looks like in that state.
yes.
Okay.
So, Tom, can I kind of start with you for a little bit? How often are you kind of pushing yourself to that level? How do you feel about that? And maybe any experience you can draw on.
Yeah,
talk
I mean,
about that.
I have a whole bunch of different anecdotes and things about this. You know, the first thing is that way too often I've been exhausted. You know, it's been really bad for my life and my relationships and my health, and you know, some of that's just my personality and you know a tendency towards feeling like my value comes from what I produce, and so there's this workaholism that comes out of that. But then there's also an element that we, I think, all run into here, personality or not, in that like we're doing something we really, really, really like and enjoy, and that you know we feel like we are expressing something from it, and it just I think pushes you to push harder than you might in a job where you're just punching the clock.
Yeah, when there's
And-
something that really means something to you, it lets you kind of really work hard at trying to make impact.
Well, and I think just for all human beings, identity, whether you're tapped into that or not, is a really important thing to you. And when the work that you're doing starts to take on this sense of like this represents me, like any ounce of yourself that you're not giving to it feels like, you know, it feels wrong in a way that wouldn't be the case if you were just at a
Ooh,
normal
that's
job.
so true. Don't you guys think when like you identify with your work, it makes such a difference in how hard you'll push yourself?
Yeah, if this work represents me,
And pushing yourself is a good thing. You know, when you go to the gym, if you don't exhaust yourself, you're not going to get the growth and the conditioning that you need. And I think it's true with your career. There's a healthy way, you know, to give all of your effort and to the point of exhaustion and still be healthy. I just think culturally we have found that a lot of people, myself included, you know, take that too far and exhaustion becomes a way of life. And I think that's really unhealthy, and it does affect relationships and it does create burnout.
You just
But
have to have a forced rest every turn, right?
nice.
It's really important. Yeah. Like exactly. Forced rest. And rest is an antidote for a number of things. And I am kind of a recovering workaholic, you know, for sure. Anybody who knows me would say that. And I do think that, but to not apply yourself to the point where you're giving everything feels like you're not living to your limit. And I think that there's a fine balance there, and we just need to talk about it and have conversations about it, because if you're not giving everything to the point of exhaustion, why are you even doing it? But at the same time, there's a point at which you're not healthy, and you really do need to rest. You do need to set routines that are healthy. You do need to eat right. You do need to maintain relationships. It's a balance that I think is really important. And for people who struggle with workaholism, I think what happens is it basically tips the scales and becomes the priority over all of those things, and so they all suffer. And that's what I've had to try to mitigate.
And Krista, did you have a thought on that too?
Well, I was just reflecting on like the seeing the work, like seeing your identity in the work, and I feel like I kind of have the opposite experience. Like when I'm really like into something, it's like maybe I'm losing myself in it. It's like it's and that can be kind of addictive too. Is like I am, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess kind of for the opposite reason.
Mm-hmm.
Totally, I can understand that.
Almost as an escape or a release.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or it's like this is a place where I don't have to have an identity. I can, just be this whatever dream is in the act,
And
like that I'm participating in.
Do you feel like that still leads you to a sense of exhaustion, or does it fill you back up again?
Both. I think it just depends on the scenario. Like it's like really getting absorbed in this dream can be like very cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, yeah, there is this, you can take it too far and you can get to an edge of your like physical and abilities, and that gives a kind of like a giddiness and like you're seeing beyond the normal, but also it can really take a toll.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I have to set boundaries for myself, or I do become addicted to either the outcome or the process itself of feeling valuable based on performance. This is just my particular story, but taking time off for me is difficult because I don't know what I would do because my identity is so closely tied to creative living and the things that I do. I like if I go on vacation, I'm tempted to work, and that I think is a symptom. That's symptomatic of something that can be corrected through discipline. But it's been a long journey for me to do that, and I found that the antidote is rest. It is distance, and if we don't take those steps, I think exhaustion can happen. And again, exhaustion can be a good thing. It can be indicative that you've really given a lot, but now it's time to rest. Now it's time to shut it down, recharge all the way. And pushing yourself, I think, can be a good thing. I just think, for me, there's just been seasons where you get into this idea of exhaustion being like, working for 4 months over the weekends and all this other stuff is just not healthy. And in the moments when you push yourself, I think it is important to kind of remember that this is a season, and it's okay to push yourself in season so long as you maintain that healthy balance, but also to remember the little victories, because when you're not at full capacity and you're exhausted or you're tired and you don't have all of your faculties available to you in the way that you normally do, sometimes it's just okay to say, you know what, I hit this milestone today. Maybe I don't have to hit 4 more today. Maybe I can just, it's noon, and maybe I'm just going to sleep this off so that I can just be my best self for everybody else. And maybe it's not just about me, Maybe it's about, there's other things at stake here, my kids, my relationships, my work, you guys. And so these are things that I've had to wrestle with too.
Some of what the experience for me has been a question of perspective. Like when I get really, really exhausted, it puts me in this place where I have to sort of look at my relationship with the work and say, why am I doing this? Why do I feel like I have to do this? And it's prompted me to explore beyond just this question of balance, like work-life balance or work-rest balance, and hit it hard and then rest, and then hit it hard and then rest. Like that feels like a losing proposition to me now.
Yeah,
as just
big
a
pendulum
structure.
swing.
Yeah,
like that's not healthy either. There's no stability in that.
So what I've really been exploring, like particularly after the Spirit Fire campaign, which was a time of great exhaustion, was this idea that I've been, like evangelizing around the office, this idea of spaciousness, where like if I filled my house completely with stuff, I could not live in it. I could not function in it. So why do I expect my mind and my heart to function the same way, where I'm just going to operate at complete maximum overload, but I have no room to move around in there, and so I'm not really
Show me that
bringing.
move again.
It's just you can't do that. You can't.
Shoulders for me.
And so it's really been so being exhausted has made me have to reanalyze or analyze my relationship to the work. I do want to talk a little bit about just telling stories. You mentioned the idea or the question of like, what does inspiration look like when you're exhausted?
Yes,
and I think
definitely.
that's really, really, really interesting because one of the things I have found working as a creative for a living is getting past the notion of like, well, I'm just not feeling creative right now. It's like, well, no, you have to. This is your job. And when that is the reality for you, you recognize that creativity is always available to you. It's
Okay.
just going to look different depending on where you're at, and you have to use where you're at, and that's just the way that it is.
Amen.
And so for me, one of the things I've recognized when I'm truly exhausted, and I mean like burnt out, dead exhausted, you know,
Okay.
working 15, 16-hour days for weeks and weeks and weeks with no rest. And the experience that I start having has now happened twice here. But one that really comes to mind is the first time we were doing Unsettled, the first print run of Unsettled, and we had a deadline that had to be hit. And so Mark and I came to the office a couple days before this deadline, and it was just, we're not leaving till this is done.
I remember that time.
And we literally didn't. We just worked through the night and crashed on the couch for 30 minutes and then got up, and we basically didn't sleep for multiple days. And again, don't.
This is
But-
not a good idea.
Yeah, but you know, and for days and days we just went and went and went. And at a certain point, when I get that tired, all the stuff and analyzing and overthinking things that happen in my head kind of goes away, and I get this sort of reckless energy, this sort of just like, to heck with it, you know, thing. And I was looking at all of the writing of Unsettled, and it just felt tight.
Okay.
It felt like, I've described how it needed to like let its hair down and shake its shoulders out a little bit. Like it felt like it was trying too hard, and it just needed to be looser. And in that last whatever stretch that was, I rewrote every word in the game, and I rewrote it at like maximum speed, just full reckless YOLO energy.
Full delirious.
And
delirium.
And the stuff that came out is, you know, the game found, you know, we'd obviously been working on its tone for years, but we really found it in that moment, in that reckless period where I stopped overthinking and just let personality just spill everywhere. And I've experienced that other times too, where my overthinking goes away and I just go on pure gut instinct when I'm tired. And there is a different kind of creativity available to me in that moment that my mind prevents at other times.
Yeah, it's like maybe at other times what we're doing is we're trying so hard, and we're trying so hard to make something be what we want it to be. And that sometimes we have to be the conduit, and sometimes it takes this like letting of guard down to actually open the conduit for creativity, where you really stop. Your ego's gone. There's no way it can be there. It's on the couch. It's been on the
Exactly.
couch for 8 hours.
Right. It passed out
Yeah.
yesterday.
Your ego is
And-
gone.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, whoom, you're open. You're this open conduit for things to flow from. I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, that's well described. That's fun. I if you laughed at anything at any point in Unsettled, I can almost guarantee you it was not in the game until that last 20-hour sprint.
Yeah, there's a piece of exhaustion where you stop caring about what other people think in a way that you probably should have the whole time.
Yeah.
And I mean that like optics are
Sorry,
important.
other people.
But yeah, sorry. I mean, like Tarantino, I think, is known for saying, you know, I made this movie for myself, but everyone's invited, and I kind of adopt a lot of that with my take on.
We know Tarantino. We've
Right.
seen your movies.
I know.
They're obviously not for other people.
Right.
It's a lot of feet shots in those.
That's the way that I feel like we should. Wow.
I'm really.
Thanks for taking that.
I'm
there.
sorry for.
He's exhausted.
I'm very much stepping on your. I'll shut up now.
I just feel like protecting the integrity of the work requires a little bit of that. Like we have to be. We have to protect the integrity of the work without worrying too much about what other people are going to think. It is our art. It is our craft. It is our choice for how those words come out. You weren't thinking about how people were going to respond to it. You just gave it what it needed.
Yeah,
right?
all of a sudden I think that really hit on something. I hadn't really thought of it that way, the way that ego can fall. Because that is what often takes so much of our energy and effort is like all this judgment that we're holding about ourselves, about other people, about how people will think about the work. We always are operating at this place, maybe it's just me, anxiety-wise, but like that takes so much energy to hold up all of those ideas about what people could be thinking, what we could be thinking about things. And sometimes maybe exhaustion is what lets that fall, but could we do that without being exhausted? Could we train ourselves to not have that big ego that we have to hold up?
Well, you tell a much more interesting story without all of that
Yes.
pretense, or I don't know what the best way to describe that would be, but when you strip all that away, and that's one of the things that strips away when you're applying yourself at a high level, you're like, listen, I don't have time to think about what everybody else thinks about this. I'm just going to give it what it needs to be significant and cool and creative and fun. That's what people want from us anyway, is what our lens offers, right? The way that we view the world and our perspective. And so that's one of the things I've learned about exhaustion for me is, number one, my capacity is really diminished. And so I really probably shouldn't put too much out there. I should take notes, take the small victories and take notes. And then when I have energy, I'm going to hit this really hard, but here's the inspiration. It's just like writing down notes at night by the bedstand or, whatever.
I have one right by my bedstand right now that just says buffalo. I just was going to sleep one night and the word buffalo came into my head and I don't know when.
Better write that down.
I love that. That's
Thinking
my
about hot
favorite.
wings, like
I don't know when that one's going to come back into play, but buffalo, I'm looking for the signs.
I love that. That's my favorite. Also, sometimes I love when I wake up and I have scribbled down a dream in the middle of the night, but I've just thought that I was writing, and it's actually just
Like a really curvy line.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, do you remember when I sent you that
that's the opposite.
random weird creative brief?
That's the opposite. Tom sent me pages and pages of genius spirit fire development. And then I was talking to him about it the next day, and he was like, "What?"
No memory
Are
of
you
this.
serious?
I woke up apparently in the middle of the night and wrote Krista 5 pages of Spirit Fire creative brief world building that I have zero memory of.
And did that inform how you did the art in
Yeah,
Spirit
it was
Fire?
genius. And he said he was asleep.
I have zero memory of this at all.
That's amazing.
To this day.
Ego gone.
no credit.
Yeah, it wasn't me. That was all plagiarized. Written by AI.
So is there a way for us to try to kind of take what we're learning? It's very obvious to me that what I'm seeing as a theme here is that exhaustion makes us drop so much of the thought patterns that keep us from doing some of our best work. How do we do that without being exhausted? How can we limit some of that judgmental thinking and ego?
I think that it is a question of awareness, and that awareness comes from having that spaciousness I was talking about. If you have room in your mind to be able to turn around and look at yourself and to be aware of how you're processing, because I do think we have this self that can observe the self as almost a separate entity. And if there's space for you to see yourself and have this awareness of how you're behaving and how you're processing and what you're carrying and what you're thinking about and how you're coming to the work, then we can get to the place that we get to when we're exhausted and all that just falls away because...
Yeah, this is the visual I'm imagining right now. Let's say we're exhausted and we're at our desk, but our desk is so messy and we can't do the work, but we have 10 minutes and we have to do the work. We just boom, just push all of that stuff off, and it's kind of scattered around on the ground, but we've got a clean desk and there's space right there for us to do the project. So it's like maintenance. we got to have the maintenance to be able to create that space consistently where our brain can operate without all that mental clutter that keeps us from doing our best work.
Yeah, and a lot of that clutter comes from saying yes to things that we should say no to. I feel like in my life, there's power in saying no to things, because when you say no to that thing, you can say yes to the thing that's important. And because we want to please other people, or because, we want to be perceived a certain way, or because we want to push ourselves more than we should, we say yes to all these different things, and they all compete. And now you have 75 progress bars that are trying to move forward, and you can't really do a good job with the 5 you need to move forward. And so for me, it's one of the steps is boundary setting, right? Just, you know what? No, but here's what I can do. I can't.
I have a boundary against those sounds.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't. I do too. She's got a shield up. You can't get through it.
I have a boundary against you making faces that make me feel uncomfortable and bad about myself.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. You're responsible for my feelings. And
Okay, back to boundaries.
Anyways,
It's all good. It's all good. Point made, I guess.
I do think you're right. I think it makes really good sense that if we're spending all our time operating here on little tasks that aren't part of these bigger things, then we're not going to be able to have the space to do those bigger things. But doesn't it also go deeper? Like,
I think some of those little tasks are the crap you're doing in your head.
Yes.
You're saying yes, not only to things people are asking you to do, but to the things that your like unconscious is asking you to worry about or mull over or plan on or revisit again and again and again.
Am I a good person? Does anyone love me? Like, even to I'm thinking to that depth. Like, we've got all these thoughts and questions operating around inside ourselves that we feel like we have to prove ourselves all the time. And those take so much energy to uphold.
It's capacity. It's just capacity.
Yeah.
And you just have to make sure that your priorities are in the capacity first and manage that so that you can say yes to the right opportunities and you don't say yes to the wrong opportunities that stress you out. Because usually the thing that stresses me out the most is having urgency around somebody else's problem. And
100%.
It's not that it's not that we don't help people and love people and like support people, but build windows for those. And it's okay to just say no, but here's what I can do. And so those are some tools that I'm still kind of trying to perfect.
Well, the thing I'm working on right now is how do I just be in this present moment, and that's the only thing that's getting my energy. Like, right now is what's real. Like,
This is real.
Well, I don't know about you.
Did it feel real when I was mocking you a moment ago?
Yeah. But like all the hypothetical futures that I could be thinking about, they're not currently real.
All the past.
Things from the past, like if I am just present in right now all the time, like I am way more free to be really aware of right now and do a better job right now and just instinctively get right now right.
Be present.
Instead of, spending right now trying to make sure I get what comes next right. Like, just trust myself right now and then trust myself when the future is also right now. Like, and just be here.
And that key is trusting yourself. And that takes work. Krista, if you have something to reflect on, put that in. But a question I have for you is, you seem like somebody who can constantly be creative and inspired. Like, I feel like you bring your inspiration, your creativity every day without fail. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's like a natural state. Like, I think I definitely kind of exist in fantasy, and like the act of art making is the way that kind of like one way that expresses itself. So yeah, I feel like I just kind of naturally think in that way. But yeah, there are struggles with, okay, how does that fit into this world? Like, how do I take this dream that I exist in and like make that actually functional for other people and existing? And then there is there's kind of a tension and a balance there.
Do you feel like you are kind of living in that exhausted state and still inspired state? Do you feel like you're able to kind of stay out of that exhausted state a bit more because you live a bit more in that creative and inspired space?
Well, I think I have kind of a duality where I exist through this fantasy, but then I also have like a strong like desire to kind of like to lockstep with people and to have a kind of discipline as a part of a larger organism, I guess, like kind of like I guess probably like military influence. Like I want to, it's like it's the freest free floating and then the most kind of rigidity. And I find that like when I'm kind of trying to lockstep with people, I can go too far and push or like get into a state of exhaustion based on trying to do what is wanted and what other people are doing, and I feel like that's kind of where I tend to get overexhausted. But it's a balance because you can't just live in a fantasy life either. So that's kind of a recurring theme, and I don't really know what the answer is yet.
Yeah, because that pendulum swings for all of us, regardless of what that duality is in us. That pendulum swings, and I don't know if there's a way to stop that. Is that just part of existence? Is that swinging duality between those things? And we always are talking about how do we find the stable center? But is that actually a place people can find? Do people stay in that stable center that yields, consistent reserves in yourself and resources in ourselves, or are we always going to be swinging back and forth?
I like the organism analogy because there are no absolutes, right? It's just constantly a process. And I think things and conditions and environments change day to day, and your mentality changes every day, and your health level kind of fluctuates, and things happen, and you have to respond to them. And it's just juggling is what it is. And I think your values inform your priorities, and your disciplines are the system that you can rely on to attain your goals. Because having a goal, once you reach the goal, then it's ended, but the system persists. And so building systems and behaviors for yourself and setting boundaries for yourself that are to be healthy, or more healthy, or as you learn into new and better things, I think we can lean on each other and find that we're very interdependent anyway. And so there's a place where it's really good to be independent, but most of the time we're interdependent, and we certainly don't want to be codependent. So there's a lot to unpack there.
It did bring me back to the boundaries concept a little bit, where how do we even know that it's time to swing the other way unless we actually hit something? Unless you actually hit a boundary that moves your momentum in another direction.
This is one of those points and moments in modern life where I quote a meme. Guess it's not really a meme. It's a thing I saw on Instagram, but someone had shared something that a teacher taught them, and the teacher was saying or something they taught their teacher taught their kids.
Okay.
Was that your emotions and your goals are like fish in a lake.
Okay.
And we spend most our life being the fish when we should be the lake.
Okay.
And it's just which to me was a statement about your awareness. Like, be aware of your feelings, say hello to them, know that they're there. Be aware of your motivations and your fears, acknowledge them, but don't be them. And when you see them all, then you can respond to them appropriately. They don't rule you. You don't just switch between which one you are right now. And so for me, it's been sort of a question of just broadening that perspective and being able to see all these elements and not just become them. And that's sort of how I'm pursuing getting that control, and not just only changing when I run into something, which is how I've lived most of my life, is exactly how you're describing. I think it's really interesting that you're describing an organism, Krista, and being part of an organism. But instead of it being sort of like, you say, oh, organism, nature, you're part of this like hippy dippy thing, but no, you're like, no, it feels like militant. It feels like the Marines, and there's this rigidity to the organism, which is really interesting. I mean, I know that like you grew up as a, military kid, so there's like part of that is just part of your experience. And I guess I don't really have a takeaway other than that stood out to me as being interesting.
There's a role that you play as part of an organism, though, too, and we get to decide what that is, based on predispositions that we have and talents and gifts and abilities that we have and a will that we have. But it's interesting to unpack, like, who decides what my role is as part of this organism? Like my body, my hands have a role, my eyes have a role, my ears have a diminished role.
We'll use other people's ears.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think what's interesting when we bring this back to the concept of exhaustion,
I was going to say, where are we right now?
Is the idea of if we are in lockstep with each other and we are like really in need of each other as a group, as an organism, we have to be able to support each other and see each other's levels of exhaustion, bring each other's level of inspiration up with the way that we work with each other. And I think that's such a gift of being able to work on a team.
I super love that you're bringing this up right now, actually.
Yeah.
I think about if the question is, how does exhaustion influence our experience doing things with Orange Nebula? This is probably like the main thing we could talk about. Like, I think about that time that Mark and I were working on Unsettled, and it is by far a top 3 Orange Nebula experience for me, even though it was unbelievably hard, reckless, irresponsible, all these things. It was also glorious because we were so in it together, and it's one of those things where, like, I don't want to go, but we had a similar experience with the Spiritfire campaign, where we are, we weren't sure we were going to launch because we were waiting to see if Unsettled was going to fulfill, but we had this wormhole planned, and what that was going to be was real nebulous depending on what. But then it's like, no, we are going live. So like, all of a sudden on this one day, we're launching a Kickstarter, and we're having this live stream event, and we're launching a new website because it needs to do things for the wormhole, the live stream event, and all this stuff is happening all at once. And it was hard hours in the weeks leading up to it.
Lockstep.
And with us getting increasingly in lockstep. But then that night before, people were staying late, and there was a moment that stands out to me very clearly. Sitting in this room doing prep for the wormhole, Krista was there, I was there, Justin was there, Malia was there, you were running some errand, and there was just this like oneness that developed in sort of the mania of that, where it's like we could not be more bonded than we are right now. Like, this is, and it just feels so special. And
it's like when you realize that the chapter that you're in is contributing to the greater story of the book that you're in, is what it feels like to me. I don't know, and take that away from where you were going, but sometimes you have to, pan out. And I think those moments remind us that we're doing life together, not projects or work together. And that does start to gel. It does start to make us, more of an organism where we all kind of have a united purpose.
And everybody's looking at each other and saying, and assessing each other's needs, caring for each other. Okay, you look like you need this. I can do that right now. You look like you need this. I can do that right now.
You really, really have this thing I think you said a minute ago, where it's like, we have each other.
Yes.
Like, Malia brought me a toothbrush. Like, that's not a thing that happens normally.
No.
Like we're just, there's this moment where you realize, like, we are all so dependent on each other right now, because we would all fall down and collapse if we weren't holding each other up. And it just, in the Orange Nebula experience, exhaustion has led to some of these moments where we truly understand how much we have in each other and how much we depend on each other and how interrelated we are.
And without those moments, I feel like where you're approaching exhaustion, or where you are exhausted and you're oppressing yourself, you don't have those memories and you don't have those milestones in your life where you're like, remember that time when we did the unsettled thing? It was you and me, and like over some crazy weekend we didn't sleep, and like,
Or you do, but they're really dark.
Because you were alone.
Sure.
Yeah. There's the other moment of true exhaustion I've had was at the end of the development cycle for the second run of Unsettled, working on the new planets. And the experience I had there was alone at home. And then it was just working till 4 a.m. by myself when my family is in the rest of the house and I'm not with them. Instead, I'm just in here doing this. And I wasn't with the team, and there was no sense of like this is some larger thing that I'm a part of together. It was just me grinding. And it was a much, much, much darker experience.
So maybe that's one really good takeaway here is that exhaustion does make you lean in. You know, it exposes a sense of vulnerability that shows your need for other people and your need for support. And there is beautiful inspiration that can come from accepting your vulnerability and accepting service from other people in a time that you're exhausted as well.
or there are mindsets that we can adopt.
I like mind steps. I'll take
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, the same thing. Because I don't think it's necessarily always someone's instinct to lean into other people. Sometimes people want to get super independent and be like, you know what, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. And sometimes that actually works, which is why people do that. I do that a lot. But when you have a whole body of people together, you're right, it is many hands make light work. And I don't know. I think sometimes there's a natural progression and sometimes there's one that you have to remember and you have to protect. And so it's just good to be cognizant of that.
It's interesting earlier when we were talking about our own experiences with exhaustion in various ways, like lowering barriers within us. And then you ask the question like, well, how do we do that all the time? How do we not need exhaustion? How do we just have that on our own? And I feel like that same question begs to be asked now about this experience as a group, as a organism. Like, how do we get, let's recognize how things can feel when we're exhausted and everyone's barriers go down.
And we need each other.
And recognize the value and the beauty of that, and then find a way to attain that without being in those crazy, ridiculous circumstances that we should never get ourselves in. How do you have that brotherhood, that sisterhood without being at war? You just have it. So now we have seen what that feels like. We know what that can be. What steps can we take in ourselves and in the way that we relate to each other and talk to each other to have that not just be a thing that happens when everything falls apart or we're having to hit really hard?
I think that's a good exploration to really kind of take away with us is how do we do that? I don't think we have the answer now. I think that might be something
Maybe
to
it's just a
explore.
thing we have to ask ourselves every day, and that's how you do it. What were you going to say, Krista?
Well, I think that like we can all really feel when people do make spaciousness too. Like that's something that you're doing, and that impacts me, like, and I feel like everybody can feel it when somebody is taking the time to make open space and to like let things be as they are. Then maybe they don't feel the need to find as much identity in what they're doing, and it expands outward to everybody.
I think you're right.
I'm going to go home and clean out my closet. I've like been wanting to make space in that closet. And what's going to happen when I actually have space?
Clean out this closet. I'm noticing that with my kids that, what they really need isn't for me to, be trying so hard and like constantly thinking, how am I doing? How could I be handling this differently? And like being in my head. What they really need is for me to just be present and lovingly available and know if I talk to Dad, he's going to give me all his attention and he's going to care. He's not going to be working really hard on making sure he's handling this moment right. He's just going to be there.
How open the
and
conduit.
He's just going to be open. Yeah. And I think, if we approach each other and our creativity with that same openness, then the connection that we have and all that is going to be better and deeper and more real.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
I don't know how we wrap up.
Teach this woman to wrap up.
All right. Thank you all so much for having this conversation. It feels good for me to be here and be able to have these conversations with you. And if you're listening, we're very grateful for you who have cared to tune in and talk to us, or at least listen to us. But if you want to talk to us, we would love to hear from you. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment. Tell us a story about a time where you kind of pushed yourself to exhaustion and what you learned there. Or maybe you've got the secret to how to stay in that stable place and you can teach us a thing. We'd love to hear about that too. If you want to join the conversation and put in any questions that you want us to talk about, you can always join us on our Discord channel. orangenebula.com/Discord can get you there. And we would just love to keep deepening this relationship. Let's get beneath the surface, shall we?
Yes. Splash.
Splash. All right, talk to you later. Bye.
Splash.
Now everyone can see. Everyone look. You can all see that timer there. I'm not the only babysitter of the timer. So if we're getting close to 10 minutes, you can't start a whole nother monologue.
Yeah, Krista. Splash.
It's been a while since we've been together. Okay, Krista, how are you feeling about being on the couch today?
Marginally disappointed because last week when we tried to do this and had technical difficulties, I was super doped up on Splash. And I was really excited about that stoned energy.
Yeah.
And so
It was probably better in your mind. So I'm glad we're
Fair
having
enough.
a round two.